Hot Ice by Christopher Bulis. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when Len Skeggs slipped through the back gate of number 47 Risemore Way and stole silently up the garden. The night was cool, still and moonless, with a haze of mist in the air. The distant orange glow of street lights silhouetted the rows of houses all around him, but the strip of common ground onto which their gardens backed was pooled in shadow. Number 47 had attracted Len's professional interest for several reasons. It was a large, detached house in a good area, but looked a little shabby. There was no sign of any alarm system, and the sole occupant was a hunched old man who hardly ever ventured out. In Len's experience, people living in such circumstances often preferred to keep their cash and valuables at home rather than in the bank. Len reached the small brick patio onto which French windows opened from the back lounge. Through the glass he could see the key glinting in the door lock. This was going to be too easy. He attached a suction cup from his tool bag to the pane beside the lock, then he drew a circle about it with a glass cutter. The hardened blade of the cutter simply slid across the glass without making a scratch. He scowled and tried again, pressing harder. Once more the tool slid aside as though moving on a film of oil. He simply could not get the cutter to bite. Obviously, this was some new type of security glass he had not come across before. Cursing silently, Len picked out a jemmy. It would be noisier, but he was not a man to give up easily. He thrust its claw end into the gap around the door frame and heaved. There was no snap of splintering wood, and the door remained absolutely rigid and immobile. With a grunt of anger, Len heaved again with all his strength. There was a sharp metallic twang, and he sat down heavily. The tip of the jemmy had broken off. Even as he gaped at the door incredulously, he became aware of an eerie sound. It seemed to reverberate through the very ground under him, faint and breathless, a whirring and groaning that rose and fell as it grew steadily stronger. Snatching up his bag, Len darted away from the patio into the shadow of a garden shed. The doctor stepped out of the TARDIS doorway, playing a torch beam about the cool, dark and silent chamber in which they had materialized. Perry cautiously followed him. "It feels like some kind of cellar," she said. "Probably because it is," the doctor agreed. Placing his Panama hat on his head, his youthful face bright and alert. "Be it ever so humble, however, this is the place." "But don't you think this coherent neutrino pulse thing you detected is dangerous?" Perry asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Nothing to do with an invasion of googly-eyed monsters or something?" "Most unlikely. The source seems relatively low-powered and isn't steady enough for a beacon. It just doesn't belong in this time and place." He smiled mischievously. "Besides, whoever heard of aliens starting an invasion in Surbiton? A common northwest of Woking, perhaps, but never Surbiton." Perry recognized the allusion. "Do you have to bring up H.G. Wells? Those blood-sucking Martian octopuses of his always did give me the creeps." "I can assure you, Perry, from personal experience, that there are absolutely no blood-sucking octopuses on Mars. That's a relief." "Just 7-foot-tall humanoid warrior lizards. Ah, here we are." There was the click of a switch, and fluorescent tubes flickered into life, filling the room with cool light. Perry blinked and looked about her. The cellar was some 20 feet square, brick-lined with stone flags on the floor. In the corner, an iron balustraded flight of steps led up to a wooden door standing slightly ajar. Running the entire length of one wall was a wooden workbench, fitted with power points and scattered with hand tools and items of salvaged electronic equipment. Resting on a small stand in the middle of the bench was a fluted tube of red metal, about 6 feet long, ringed at one end with a cluster of dull black spheres, each of which trailed a bundle of multicoloured wires. The doctor stepped over and examined the device with deep interest. "Yes, this is the source of the neutrino pulse, all right," he pronounced. "No kidding," Perry said. "If I were asked what it was for, would I understand the answer?" "Well, it's part of a star drive module. It functions rather like a spark plug in an internal combustion engine, giving the initial kick to initiate the lepton flux implosion." "Okay, I get the picture," said Perry. So we guess an alien's broken down on Earth and he's trying to fix his engine with bits and pieces he's found around here, right? That is the most likely explanation. So where is he? She looked about her nervously. Or do I mean, where is it? And is he or it friendly? Just then they heard the groaning. It was very faint and came from the direction of the half-open cellar door. After a few seconds, it degenerated into a fit of feeble coughing. That doesn't sound too good, Perry said. No, agreed the doctor, making for the steps. The cellar door opened out from under the house's main staircase onto a wide, bare hall, with the front door at one end and 3 other doors, all closed, leading off it. Except for a single dim bulb burning at the very top of the stairwell 2 floors above, all was in darkness. "Hello?" the doctor called out loudly. "Is anybody there?" There came another moan, louder than the one they'd heard before, followed by what might have been a string of muffled, indecipherable words. "Upstairs," said the doctor, leading the way. All the doors leading off the first landing were closed, and no lights showed underneath them. The distressed voice still came from above, getting steadily louder as they ascended. A single door opened off the second landing. Coughs and groans and muttering could be heard behind it. "Hello?" the doctor said. "Are you all right?" The sounds continued undiminished. With a small shrug, the doctor tried the door. It opened smoothly. The long attic room with half-sloping walls was unlit, except for the glow of city lights filtering in through a single dormer window. The doctor switched on his torch again and swung it about. In the far corner was an iron-framed single bed. On it was a body-shaped mound covered with a blanket, from which came more groans, interspersed with slurred, rasping words. They stepped quickly over to the bed, the doctor saying reassuringly, "It's all right, we're here to help you." Handing Perry the torch, he pulled back the blanket. Underneath was a portable stereo cassette player resting between 2 pillows laid lengthwise. Even as they stared at the machine in surprise, another fit of recorded coughing issued from the speakers. The landing door slammed shut behind them, followed by the sound of heavy bolts sliding into place. The doctor ran to the door and twisted the handle, at the same time throwing his shoulder against it, but the door remained firmly shut. He gave a resigned sigh and thrust his hands into his pockets. Perry forgot to keep her voice steady. "Looks like we've walked into a trap, huh?" "I'm afraid so. What about the window?" They examined the dormer. The latches had been removed and the frame had been screwed securely in place. "Even if we could get out, it would be a dangerous drop," the doctor admitted, "and I don't think we could improvise a long enough rope from that blanket. Somebody seems to have thought of everything." "Can't we signal with the torch?" Perry suggested. "I don't think many people will be looking out for SOSs at this time of the morning." Perry stared out into the misty darkness, trying to stay calm. Just what the hell wanted to keep them here? Len crouched beside the garden shed, thinking hard. He'd rationalized away the sound that had disturbed him as some old central heating boiler starting up. Now he was reasoning further that security doors that tough had to be protecting something valuable. If only he could find a way through them. Just then, a flicker of movement at the bottom of the garden caused him to shrink further back into the shadows. 2 figures were making their way silently towards the house. As they passed within a few yards of him, he realized that they were wearing dark, full-length robes with hoods pulled over their heads, bearing an uncanny resemblance to monks in cassocks. They paused before the French windows. After a minute, there was a brief flash of light. The door opened, and they passed inside. Len knew he should go, now that there were others in the house, but the lure of the wide open door and the thought that this unlikely duo were hardly stiff opposition held him back. He waited a couple of minutes to see if the monks would emerge again, then cat-footed over to the door, only to stop short in amazement. A perfect half-circle about the frame had been neatly cut away. The monks had broken in. They were in the same line of business as he was. Len now knew for certain he was onto something big, maybe the job of a lifetime. He smiled grimly. He'd poke about himself, find out just what this pair were after, then take it off their hands. Pulling on his balaclava mask and reassured by the weight of the jemmy in his hand, he stepped inside. Up in the attic room, Perry held the torch while the doctor methodically ran his hands around the doorframe, looking for any hidden catch or weak point. "I really must get round to building another sonic screwdriver," he muttered. "It's just the thing for this sort of situation." "Give it up, Doctor," she said. "Why don't we check the walls again?" Just then there was the sound of bolts being withdrawn from outside. The doctor raised his eyebrows in surprise and cautiously tried the handle. The door opened easily. "How did you do that?" Perry said, impressed. "I didn't. Somebody wanted to keep us here for a while, and now they want us to leave." The doctor looked about him, a grim expression on his face. "Well, we're not going to play your game anymore," he said clearly. "We're staying here until you show yourself and explain what's going on." There was a sudden hissing sound. A plume of white vapour poured out of a vent in the skirting board beside the bed and billowed across the room. The doctor swept Perry out through the door with him and slammed it shut behind them. "Perhaps a strategic withdrawal is indicated," he said, as the vapour began to seep under the door. They hurried downstairs to the ground floor and turned towards the cellar. As they went through the hall, they failed to notice that the lounge door, which had been closed when they had passed earlier, was now open a crack. In the crack, an eye glinted. Len had spent some minutes in the lounge rifling through a bureau and checking hopefully for wall safes behind pictures. But the room had proved disappointing, sparsely furnished with dusty furniture. He had decided to explore the rest of the house and actually had his hand on the door handle when he heard rapid footsteps on the stairs. He didn't know what to make of the Joker in the weird clothes. Was that really celery on his coat? Or his companion? Except that she was a very tasty piece indeed. Had they been the ones in the robes and hoods, he wondered? And why were they in such a hurry to go down to the cellar? He listened intently for a couple of minutes and thought he could just make out the faintest murmur of voices from below, but that was all. Cautiously, he started to ease the door open, only to hear a faint click and a swish from the hall. Once more he peered through the crack between the door and jamb. The hunched figure of the occupier of number 47 appeared from the direction of the kitchen and moved silently across the hall to the open cellar door. In his hand, Len noticed, he carried a short stick. He stood there for a minute as though listening for any sound from below. Then, obviously satisfied, he also descended into the cellar. The doctor and Perry stopped short as they reached the bottom of the cellar steps, as they realized things were not as they had left them. A heavy cable now ran from the half-open door of the TARDIS over to the workbench, where it was wired into the mechanism from the alien star drive. "Somebody sure is playing games with us," Perry said, as the doctor led the way into the TARDIS, stepping over the snaking cable. A panel at the base of the main console had been opened, exposing a junction box into which the cable had been plugged. But it was not this that caught their attention. Resting on top of the console was a flat black box, about 18 inches wide. On it was mounted a transparent dome containing within it the largest gemstone Perry had ever seen. It was the size of a small fist, and its faces glittered with blue-green fire under the lights. "Wow! Will you look at that?" she exclaimed, gazing at the jewel in fascination. "It must be your birthday, Doctor. Somebody's left you a present." "An unwanted gift," the doctor said tersely, "which I think we would do well to—" "Stay where you are, blasphemers," said a flat voice behind them. They turned round. Two black-robed figures stood by the doorway, their faces concealed within the shadows of their hoods. Each had one arm extended towards them, and from their voluminous sleeves projected what looked like magicians' wands. For featureless rods, they appeared unaccountably menacing. The two figures glided forward, and Perry realized with a start that though their trailing robes did not quite touch the ground, there was no sign of feet or legs under them. As they came closer, she felt unnatural warmth radiating from their bodies, causing beads of perspiration to form on her brow. The figure on the left extended another rod, silver and bulbous-tipped, from his other sleeve, and pointed it at the gem in its container. Immediately the tip pulsated with green light. "Our quest is ended," he said, quiet triumph sounding in the flat tones. "The tracer has led us to the Eye of Gar, and to those who stole it." "The Eye of Gar?" echoed Perry incredulously. "Careful, Perry," the doctor said airily. "It really doesn't do to mock the nomenclature of alien icons." He turned back to the priests. "So, you're Ventrosians, I take it. We are the priests of the Temple of Gar on Ventros Prime, and we have been entrusted with the task of recovering the Eye." "Well, how do you do? I'm the doctor, and this is my friend Perry." "Silence! We have already scanned you. We also recognize this vessel, Time Lord. Did you use it to aid your Ventrosian accomplice in the theft of the Eye?" "But we didn't steal it," Perry protested. "We've been framed." "Keep your native servant quiet," the priest warned the doctor. "Who are you calling a servant?" Perry said indignantly. "I'm afraid Ventrosians aren't the most subtle of beings, Perry," the doctor explained, an edge beneath his light words. "Always had something of a superiority complex. That was why, millennia ago, we refused to share our technology with them, and they've resented us for it ever since. But I didn't think they would be so foolish as to believe we would covet one of their holy relics." "Then why is your craft connected to a drive unit from the thief's vessel?" the priest asked. "As my friends tried to tell you, someone wants you to believe that we're the guilty parties. We've been used, can't you see that?" "We see only thieves and conspirators who have been caught with the Eye in their possession. For this crime there can be but one punishment." "Why can't you listen to reason?" the doctor pleaded. "We sense the protective fields within your craft, Time Lord, but our personal auras can negate them," the priest continued remorselessly. "The sentence will be carried out immediately. When your accomplice returns, he will suffer the same fate." The doctor frowned. "For the last time, we don't have an accomplice." The priests raised their wands a little higher. "No!" the doctor shouted. Even as Perry threw herself sideways, a flicker of blue fire lashed out and transfixed her. It was as though she had received an electric shock. Her muscles spasmed, then went numb. She stumbled and fell, slumped helplessly against the wall of the console room, with the doctor similarly incapacitated collapsing at her side. The priest loomed over them like black ghosts. "There is no escape. Now you will die slowly and painfully, so that you will have time to reflect upon the enormity of your crime. May Gar have mercy upon you." The wands glowed red, and it felt to Perry that her skin was on fire. She tried to scream, but even that release was denied her. Len peered down into the cellar from the shadows at the top of the steps. Greed and curiosity were finely balanced within him now. He had to know what was going on, almost as much as he wanted to find something of value. What was the old man doing standing in front of the half-opened door of an old-fashioned police call box, his whole attention apparently focused upon it? What was the box doing here anyway? And where were the man and the woman he had seen coming down? They couldn't be hiding in the box itself, could they? Why would they, anyway? Even so, there was an odd sort of light coming from it, and he imagined he could make out the murmur of voices. Then the old man stepped forward. Perry was hardly aware of a fifth figure entering the console room through the agony that was racking her body. All she knew was that the room was suddenly lit up by two quick bursts of intense light, accompanied by a searing, crackling sound, and then that the terrible pain vanished as though turned off by a switch. Smoke was billowing in the air, together with fluttering scraps of burning fabric. Glowing ashes and twisted metal lay where the priests had stood, while their power wands and tracer device rolled loosely across the floor. Unable to speak or turn her head, it was all Perry could do to blink her eyes until they focused on the stout, slightly hunched-back figure of an old man dressed in crumpled trousers and a baggy jumper. The benign expression on his wrinkled face was so reassuring that she would have cried out in relief if she had been able to move her lips. Then she saw he was carrying a power wand identical to those of the priests. "At last I am rid of them," he said, as though half to himself. His features did not reflect the triumphant nature of his words, which were, if anything, in even flatter tones than those of the creatures he had killed. His dark eyes flickered across Perry and the doctor as they lay helplessly against the wall. "The paralysis will soon wear off, but by then I will have gone." He walked over to the console and carefully gathered up the box holding the Eye of Gar. Perry felt a wash of heat as he moved. He looked at the doctor. "You would not understand why I had to steal the eye. Suffice to say, I felt it necessary," he continued. "But I could not escape my pursuers. Eventually I was forced to land on this inhospitable planet. Fortunately, I soon detected the energy signature of your TARDIS's frequent visits here, and used my own star drive to lure you, and the priests, to me. You were the most convincing targets for their wrath." The doctor concentrated, screwed up his eyes, forcing out words. Diversion?" The old man nodded. "The interior of this vessel, you see, was the only place they would not be able to sense my approach until it was too late." Out of the corner of her eye, Perry caught a flicker of movement. A black masked head had looked in through the door, then withdrawn. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a groan. "Now it is over, and I am free to leave," the old man went on. "I will take the priest's vessel. No one from Ventros Prime will ever find me again. Thank you, Time Lord, for your unwitting assistance." He turned away and walked out of the TARDIS. Len did not care how the trick with the inside of the police box was done, or what had happened to the man and woman slumped against the wall. He had eyes only for the most fabulous gem he had ever seen. He was right. This really was the chance of a lifetime. And so, as the old man stepped out through the narrow door, Len hit him across the back of the neck with his jemmy. He knew there was something wrong even as the blow struck. The old man's body radiated impossible heat, and it was not flesh and bone that crumpled under the blow as he fell to the floor, dropping the gem case to claw at his hunched shoulders. To Len's horror, a flap of white-haired skin was hanging loose from the back of the man's head, revealing a shell of torn foil and spongy fibres underneath. Then, even as Len froze in sickened disbelief, the old man ceased his writhing and rose back upright, except that his legs were now dangling limply and were clearly not supporting him. Len snatched up the gem case and dashed for the stairs. Halfway up, a hole exploded in the wall behind him, peppering him with fragments of brick and mortar. He glared fearfully over his shoulder. The old man was pointing some kind of weapon at him with his shaking hands, and sparks were playing about its tip. And he moved forwards as though carried on invisible wires, his legs trailing behind him, toe-caps dragging across the ground. In a voice that was rapidly losing all semblance of humanity, the old man cried, "Thief, return that crystal or die!" Len dived through the cellar door, and the old man glided unsteadily up the steps after him, thin tendrils of steam seeping out of his clothes. They had heard the commotion in the cellar from inside the TARDIS, then the sounds of pursuit fading into the distance. After a few minutes, Perry felt the tingling of life returning to her limbs. With an obvious effort, the doctor sat up beside her. With his support, she struggled to her feet. She licked her lips and managed to say, "Pretty ironic. I think our thief got mugged." The doctor picked up the priest's tracer device and tried the control switch. The tip remained dark. "Power cell burnt out by secondary discharge," he muttered. He retrieved his torch and they walked stiffly out into the cellar. He sniffed, frowning. "Can you smell that?" There was a sickly odour of decay hanging in the air. "Yeah, it stinks. What does it mean?" "It means that at least one thief is going to die tonight if we don't prevent it. Come on!" They followed the foul scent through the lounge, its French windows now blasted apart and smoking, across the patio and down the garden. Out on the common the trail faded into the misty night air. They found the alien after several minutes of searching by torchlight. He was lying amid the tussocky grass, a crumpled form wreathed in steam and twitching feebly. There was no sign of the man in the balaclava. The stench grew worse as they drew nearer, and Perry covered her mouth, retching. The doctor, apparently now oblivious to the smell, knelt beside the creature. A voice grated from somewhere within the body, but the lips on the macabre face no longer moved. The benign expression was now frozen, mask-like on the face.
Lost him. Motivator unit failed.
We must get you back to the house, the doctor said.
Too late, Time Lord. At least the priest did not get the eye.
Then he sagged and was still. Vapour began to pour more rapidly from his clothes. Stand back, the doctor warned. The human disguise split and fell away, the clothes disintegrating to reveal the rods and joints of mechanical limbs and layers of insulation underneath. Within all this, Perry glimpsed a slender worm-like creature that seemed to be melting before her eyes. It was supported by a lattice of metal bands and tubes that connected to a complex backpack which was cracked down one side. With a furious rush of steam, the thing bubbled and flashed into flame. He chose to chase after his precious eye instead of waiting to repair his life support unit, the doctor said sadly, as they stood back from the blaze. He must have built an environment chamber for himself somewhere in the house. What happened? Perry demanded. It looked like he was melting away. But he was hot, like the priests. I felt it. You felt the heat from his cooling unit, like the coils at the back of a refrigerator. The Ventrosians live on a frigid world, and have an appropriately volatile body chemistry to compensate. Exposed to Earth temperatures, he simply burnt up. Even as they stared at the dying embers, Perry became aware of a reddish glow beginning to show through the mist about 50 yards away. In seconds, it had become a perfect sphere of growing intensity, flashing through orange and then yellow. Down! The doctor shouted. There was a dull boom as the sphere disintegrated into a shower of flaming fragments and a fiery cloud that boiled skyward. Perry lifted her face from the grass. And what was that? The priest's ship, I should think, said the doctor. It must have had a time self-destruct mechanism, activated when it lost track of its owner's life signs. Those guys were playing for keeps, she observed. Yes, and they've all come out losers, he said bleakly, before scrambling to his feet and pulling Perry up with him. Now, back to the house before people come out to see what's happening. I must repair the tracer. There's still one thief to track down. The guy. No one's rushing after this Eye of Gar thing now, are they? What's the rush? Because he doesn't realise what he's stolen, said the doctor grimly. The phone in the house was working normally. Perry wondered what had happened to the original owner of this place, and shuddered. She dialed the number the doctor gave her, and passed on the request for a clean-up squad to an organisation she'd never heard of called UNIT. That's right, she concluded. He said to tell you to call a Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart if you wanted to check that this is on the level. No, my name's not Smith, it's Brown. Look, just come round here and pick up the pieces, guys. Good night. She hung up and went back to the TARDIS. The doctor had just finished inserting a fresh power cell into the tracer. He switched it on, and immediately the tip began to flash green. Right, said the doctor. If I can just fix a range and bearing. The light flickered and died. The doctor worked the switch, but to no effect. Flat battery again? Perry asked. The doctor sighed heavily, and for a moment he seemed old and tired, his youthful energy drained. No, Perry. The gem case circuitry has been damaged. I'm afraid it may be too late. In the back of a lock-up garage a little over a mile away, Len Skeggs swung another frantic blow with his sledgehammer at the gem case, which he had clamped into a large bench vise. The gemstone he could conceal easily enough, but its bulky container was a liability. He wanted nothing lying around that might connect him with the crime, or whatever that thing was that chased him out of the house. He would have to break the gem up to sell it on, of course, but even the fragments of something that size would set him up for life. The double-walled protective dome suddenly cracked and popped out of its securing collar, spilling the gem onto the concrete floor. Len dropped his hammer and eagerly snatched up the precious object before it could roll away. A second later he cried out in pain and surprise. The gem was sticking to his hands, burning his skin with intense cold. As he struggled to tear it free, it began to boil away into gas that stung his eyes and seared his lungs. Choking and blinded, gasping for clean air, Len collapsed to the floor and then lay still. Still clamped in the vice, the gem's environmental support unit sparked as its power cells shorted out, sending out a trail of smoke before hungry flames began to lick up towards the cluttered shelves over the workbench. Perry could hear the distant sirens of emergency vehicles as she took one final look around the cellar, while the doctor finished making sure the alien star drive component that had lured them here was completely useless. "And all for a chunk of ammonia and methane ice," she said. "Value is often a purely arbitrary concept," the doctor said somberly, tossing aside the cable that had been connected to the TARDIS console. "Many famous Earth jewels have a history of theft and death behind them, and it would seem that alien gems are no exception." He sighed. "Come on, let's go somewhere more cheerful. Leave the tidying up to the professionals." She followed him inside the TARDIS where the air was clean and fresh. She breathed deeply, but the stink of the alien thief's decaying body seemed to linger on in her lungs, mingling with dark thoughts of obsession, greed, and the dead.